Isabella Winters clutched her threadbare shawl tighter as the bitter autumn wind swept through Amarillo, Texas, carrying with it the whispers that had followed her family name for years, whispers of scandal, of shame, of a father who'd fled with the town's savings and a mother who'd died of heartbreak, leaving her alone at 18 with nothing but a tarnished legacy and doors that closed in her face before she could even knock. The year was 1876, and the once prosperous Winters family had fallen from grace faster than a shot glass emptied at the dusty Boot Saloon. Isabella, now 22, had spent 4 years watching opportunity after opportunity vanish. Today was no different. She stood outside the general store, the help wanted sign still visible through the window, though Mr. Peterson had just informed her with thinly veiled disdain that the position had been suddenly filled. "I could work nights," she had pleaded. "I don't need much pay." "Miss Winters," Peterson had said, straightening his vest, "your father robbed half this town blind. Ain't nobody here wants to see a Winters handling their money again." Isabella's cheeks burned at the memory as she walked down the main street. 4 years had passed since her father's crimes, yet Amarillo's memory ran as deep as the Palo Duro Canyon. She wasn't her father, but in a town this size, she might as well have been. The sound of hooves on packed dirt made her step aside. A wagon rolled past, loaded with lumber, the driver nodding politely without truly seeing her the way most folks in town did, when they acknowledged her at all. Isabella glanced at the town's bank as she passed, her stomach tightening. She had exactly $2.43 to her name. The rent on her small room above the laundry was due in 3 days, and Mrs. Chen had been more than patient these past months. Isabella turned down a side street, heading toward the one place she hadn't tried yet, Zeke Davis's ranch, the Double D, just outside of town. She'd heard his foreman had taken ill, and he needed someone who could read, write, and keep ledgers. It was a long shot. Ranchers were often even more suspicious than townsfolk, but she was out of options. The Double D spread lay 3 miles outside Amarillo. By the time Isabella arrived, the sun hung low in the Texas sky, painting the prairie gold. The ranch house stood 2 stories tall, with a wide porch and windows that caught the setting sun. Nearby stood a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings, all well maintained, speaking to the prosperity of the operation. Her heart sank when she saw 3 men already seated on the porch, hats in hand. More applicants. She recognized one as the former schoolteacher, another as a clerk from the railroad office. Men with spotless reputations and experience, men whose fathers hadn't absconded with the town's savings. Isabella almost turned back, but desperation rooted her feet to the ground. She'd walk to the next town if she had to, but first, she'd try here. As she approached, the ranch hands working nearby paused to stare. One whispered something that made another laugh. Isabella lifted her chin and kept walking. The men on the porch fell silent as she climbed the steps. The former schoolteacher, Mr. Adams, cleared his throat. "Miss Winters," he said, not unkindly, "I believe you're mistaken. Mr. Davis is hiring a ranch foreman, not household help." "I'm aware of the position, Mr. Adams," Isabella replied, smoothing her faded blue dress. "I can read, write, and cipher. I've kept books since I was 15. The third man snorted. "Your pa taught you, did he? Before or after he robbed us all?" Isabella's cheeks flamed, but before she could respond, the front door swung open, and the man who stepped out made her breath catch in her throat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly under his Stetson. His jawline was strong, his eyes the color of the sky after a storm. His clothes were plain but well-made denim pants, a blue shirt rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He wasn't from Amarillo, she would have remembered him. "Gentleman," he said, then spotted Isabella. His brows lifted slightly. "And lady, I'm Isaiah West. Zeke asked me to interview for the position while he's in Fort Worth on business." Isaiah West. The name meant nothing to Isabella, but the three men shifted uncomfortably. "The Isaiah West?" Mr. Adams asked. "From the goodnight-loving trail." Isaiah nodded once, his expression revealing nothing. "Thought you rode with rangers now," said the third man. "Did," Isaiah replied. "Don't any more." He gestured to the door. "Now, who's first?" The interviews proceeded quickly. Isaiah spent less than 10 minutes with each man before thanking them and showing them out. When it was Isabella's turn, Mr. Adams paused at the bottom of the steps. "Miss Winters," he said, "do yourself a favor and go home. A young woman alone at a ranch full of cowboys. It ain't proper. Besides," his voice dropped, "folks are still raw about your father." Isabella squared her shoulders. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Adams, but I need this position." Inside, the ranch house was comfortably appointed with good furniture and a stone fireplace. Isaiah West gestured to a chair before a desk piled with ledgers and correspondence. "Miss," he prompted, taking the seat behind the desk. "Winters," she said, bracing for the usual reaction. "Isabella Winters." If the name meant anything to him, he didn't show it. "Miss Winters, the position requires managing payroll, supply orders, breeding records, and correspondence. Can you handle those tasks?" "Yes, sir. I managed my father's accounts for 3 years before." She faltered. "Before he left town, I've been doing odd bookkeeping jobs since." Isaiah nodded, studying her with those storm blue eyes. "Any references?" "Mrs. Chen at the laundry, and Mrs. Abernathy at the dressmaker's shop. I haven't had steady work in some time." She took a deep breath. "Mr. West, I should tell you my father stole money from half the town before disappearing 4 years ago. That's why no one will hire me. But I'm not my father. I need this job, and I would work harder than anyone else to prove myself worthy of it." Isaiah leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Zeke mentioned the townsfolk have been unhelpful with filling this position, said they're suspicious of outsiders." He paused. "Seems they're just as suspicious of insiders in your case." Isabella stared at her hands. "Yes, sir." "Look at me, Miss Winters." She raised her eyes to his. "I don't much care what your father did. I care what you can do. Can you manage this ranch's books honestly and efficiently?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "The men won't like it a woman giving orders, tracking their hours." "They'll like it even less when they learn my name," she replied. "But I can handle their dislike, Mr. West. I've had 4 years of practice." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The pay is $25 a month with room and board. The previous foreman's quarters are behind the main house, small but private. You'll take meals with Zeke and me in the main house. Hours are sunup to sundown, 6 days a week." Isabella's heart hammered. Was he offering her the position? "Mr. West, are you saying, be here tomorrow at dawn," he said, standing. "Bring whatever you own. I'll send one of the hands to help with your things." "But why hire me when you could have Mr. Adams or the others?" Isaiah studied her for a long moment. "Because you're the only one who walked 3 miles to apply, knowing you'd likely be turned away. That tells me something about your character." He opened the door. "And Miss Winters, everyone deserves a second chance, even those paying for sins that aren't theirs." The next morning, Isabella arrived at the Double D with her meager belongings: 2 dresses, a nightgown, a hairbrush, a small box of letters from her mother, and a book of poetry. Everything she owned in the world fit into a single carpetbag. Isaiah met her on the porch, looking as if he'd already been up for hours. "Morning, Miss Winters. Jose will show you to your quarters, then I'll introduce you to the men at breakfast. Jose, a Mexican ranch hand with kind eyes and a weathered face, carried her bag to a small cabin behind the main house. The previous foreman's quarters were simple but clean: a single room with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small stove, and a desk. A window overlooked the corral, and morning sunlight streamed through the glass. "Thank you," she told Jose, who nodded and left her to settle in. Isabella placed her mother's letters in the desk drawer, arranged her clothes in the small chest, and splashed water on her face from the wash basin. Then she pinned up her dark brown hair, straightened her best dress, a navy blue that had faded to almost gray with washing, and prepared to face the ranch hands. The bunkhouse was alive with conversation when she entered with Isaiah, but it fell deathly silent at the sight of her. 12 men, from grizzled veterans to young cowboys barely out of their teens, stared in disbelief. "Men," Isaiah said, his voice calm but firm, "this is Miss Isabella Winters, your new foreman. She'll be handling the books, supplies, and schedules from now on." "A woman foreman?" One of the older hands scoffed. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious, Harkins," Isaiah replied. "And she deserves the same respect you'd show any man in the position." "Winters?" another man said, frowning. "Any relation to Robert Winters, the banker who stole half the town blind?" Isabella met the man's gaze steadily. "He was my father," she answered, her voice clear despite her pounding heart. "But I am not him, and I intend to prove that to all of you through honest work." The silence that followed was thick with skepticism. Then a young cowboy in the back, barely older than Isabella herself, let out a low whistle. "Well, she's got grit, I'll give her that." "Grit don't balance books," Harkins muttered. "Miss Winters kept books for her father's bank for 3 years, Isaiah said. She's more qualified than any of you to manage the ranch's accounts." "No offense, West," said another hand, "but Zeke know about this. Hiring a woman, hiring her." "It was Zeke's idea to look beyond the usual candidates," Isaiah replied smoothly. "He's tired of the town's politics interfering with good business." Isabella suspected this wasn't entirely true, but she kept her face neutral. "Now," Isaiah continued, "I expect Miss Winters to be treated with respect. Anyone who can't manage that can collect their pay and move on. Clear?" The men nodded reluctantly, and breakfast resumed with an uncomfortable undercurrent. Isabella ate quickly, aware of the stares, before escaping to the ranch office to begin examining the books. The ledgers were in disarray, with entries missing and figures that didn't match. She lost herself in the work, barely noticing as the morning passed into afternoon. A knock at the door startled her, and she looked up to find Isaiah watching her from the doorway. "Making progress?" he asked. Isabella nodded. "The previous foreman wasn't very thorough. I'll need a few days to reconcile everything." "Take whatever time you need." He hesitated. "How are you settling in?" "Well enough," she replied, not mentioning the whispers she'd heard when passing the barn, or the way some of the men refused to look at her when she asked questions. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. West. I won't let you down." Something in his expression softened. "I know you won't, Miss Winters." He turned to leave, then paused. "Join me for dinner tonight, in the main house. Zeke's still away and I could use the company." Isabella's pulse quickened. Dining alone with Isaiah West would only fuel the ranch gossip, but refusing would seem ungrateful. "I'd be honored," she said finally. That evening, Isabella changed into her other dress, a faded green that had once been her Sunday best, and made her way to the main house. She found Isaiah in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, stirring something that smelled delicious. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. He glanced up with a half-smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, less weathered. "Trail habit. Can't always count on someone else to do it." I could have helped, she offered, moving closer to inspect the pot of stew. You've been working all day. Besides, I'm not half bad at it. He ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table, which he'd already laid with cutlery and a loaf of fresh bread. Sit. Eat. Tell me what you found in those ledgers. The stew was indeed good beef, potatoes, and carrots in a rich broth that spoke of hours of simmering. Isabella told him about the discrepancies she'd found, the missing entries, and her plans to reorganize the system. The ranch is bleeding money somewhere, she concluded. Not through theft, I don't think, but through poor management, supply orders that never arrived, workers paid twice, breeding records that don't match the actual stock. Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. That's what Zeke suspected. That's why he wanted someone detail-oriented. He broke off a piece of bread. Tell me about yourself, Miss Winters. How did a banker's daughter end up desperate enough to work on a cattle ranch? Isabella stiffened. I wasn't always desperate, Mr. West, before my father did what he did. We were respected in Amarillo. My mother came from Boston, educated. She taught me to read, write, appreciate literature. She looked down at her bowl. After father left and she died, I had to sell most of our possessions to pay back what I could of what he stole. It wasn't nearly enough. And no other family to turn to, none. Mother was estranged from her family for marrying beneath her station. Father had no one. She met his gaze. What about you, Mr. West? You're not from Amarillo. No, he agreed. Grew up in Missouri. Left home at 16, worked cattle drives, scouted for the Army, rode with the Rangers for a time. He said it matter-of-factly, but Isabella sensed there was much more to his story. Zeke and I crossed trails a few times over the years. When he mentioned needing help with the ranch while he considers retirement, I agreed to come on temporarily. Temporarily. The thought of Isaiah leaving made her oddly disappointed. A few months, maybe longer. Depends on how things go. He studied her. You don't have to stay in Amarillo, you know. With your skills, you could start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere without your father's shadow. Isabella had thought of it many times. It costs money to start over, she said quietly. Besides, this is home, however unwelcoming it's become. Well, Isaiah said, refilling her water glass. For now, the Double D is your home, and despite what the men think now, they'll come around when they see you're not afraid of hard work. Isabella hoped he was right. She helped him clear the dishes, aware of the domesticity of the moment, of how long it had been since she'd shared a meal with someone who didn't look at her with suspicion or pity. As she walked back to her quarters under a star-filled Texas sky, Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in 4 years' hope. The days fell into a rhythm. Isabella woke before dawn, organized her tasks for the day, ate breakfast with the ranch hands, who still regarded her with suspicion but had moved from outright hostility to grudging tolerance, and spent her mornings in the office. Afternoons often found her visiting different parts of the ranch, observing operations, taking inventory, and making notes for improvements. A week into her employment, she presented Isaiah with her findings. The Double D has been losing approximately $200 a month, she explained, showing him the reconciled ledgers. Some of it's waste ordering supplies that were already on hand, paying for services never rendered. Some is poor record keeping cattle counts that don't match sales records. She hesitated, and I believe someone may have been skimming small amounts over time. Isaiah's expression darkened. Who? I can't be certain, but the previous foreman, Mr. Jenkins, made some unusual entries. Money allocated for fence repairs that never happened, wages for extra hands during roundup who don't appear on any other records. You've been thorough, Isaiah said, impressed. What do you recommend? A complete inventory of stock and supplies. New procedures for purchasing and payroll. Nothing leaves the ranch without 2 signatures, yours and mine. And, she bit her lip, I'd like to ride out with the men occasionally to see the operations firsthand. Isaiah's eyebrows rose. You ride. I used to before. Everything. I'm rusty but capable. He considered her request. The men won't like it. They already don't like me, she pointed out, but they'll respect me more if I understand their work. Isaiah smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You're full of surprises, Isabella Winters. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and it sent an unexpected warmth through her. Very well. We'll ride out tomorrow morning to the south pasture. Wear something practical. The next morning, Isabella dressed in her most practical outfit, a divided skirt she'd hastily altered from an old dress, a cotton blouse, and a borrowed hat to shield her face from the sun. She met Isaiah at the stables, where he was saddling 2 horses. This is Penny, he said, indicating a gentle-looking chestnut mare. She's steady, won't give you any trouble. Isabella approached the horse, offering her palm. Penny snuffled it, then nudged her shoulder as if they were already friends. She's lovely, Isabella said, stroking the mare's neck. Isaiah helped her mount, his hands firm at her waist as he lifted her into the saddle. The brief contact sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the early morning chill. He mounted his own horse, a powerful black gelding, with the easy grace of a man who'd spent most of his life in the saddle. They rode out as the sun crested the horizon, painting the prairie in gold and amber. Isabella's riding skills returned quickly, her body remembering the rhythm of horse and saddle. They rode mostly in silence, but it was comfortable rather than awkward. The south pasture spread before them, dotted with cattle, the double Deticus prize herd of Herefords, their red bodies and white faces distinctive against the landscape. 3 cowboys worked the herd, and their surprise at seeing Isabella was evident even from a distance. Miss Winters wanted to see the operation firsthand, Isaiah explained when they rode up. She's reconciling our herd counts with the ledgers. The oldest of the 3 cowboys, a man called Stubbs, spat tobacco juice on the ground. Ain't no place for a woman out here. And yet here I am, Isabella replied calmly. Mr. Stubbs, your count from last week shows 240 head in this pasture. I see considerably fewer. Stubbs shifted uncomfortably. Some might have wandered north. Through a fence? Isaiah asked, his voice dangerously soft. Fence has weak spots, Stubbs muttered. Been telling Jenkins for months. Isabella made a note in the small book she'd brought. I'll allocate funds for repairs immediately. In the meantime, I'd like an accurate count, please. The youngest cowboy, barely 20 and called Frankie, looked between Isabella and Stubbs nervously. Madam, we can do a proper count today. Have it to you by sundown. Thank you, Frankie, she said with a smile that made the young man blush. They rode on, checking fence lines, water sources, and other pastures. By midday, Isabella's thighs ached from hours in the saddle, but she refused to complain. They stopped by a creek to rest the horses and eat the lunch Mrs. Gomez, the cook, had packed for them. You're good with the men, Isaiah observed as they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Firm but fair. I learned from watching my father, she replied, then grimaced. His business practices, not his, other activities. Isaiah studied her, his blue eyes thoughtful. You're nothing like him, Isabella. You know that, right? The gentleness in his voice made her throat tight. Some days I'm not so sure. We share the same name, the same blood. Blood doesn't determine character, he said firmly. Actions do. And everything I've seen from you shows integrity, intelligence, and courage. Isabella looked away, unable to bear the kindness in his gaze. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Finally, Isabella cleared her throat. "We should head back if we want to check the north pasture before dark." They mounted up and continued their inspection. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was setting and Isabella's body protested every movement. But she felt accomplished, clearer on the ranch's operations and more confident in her ability to manage its business affairs. As Isaiah helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary, he smiled down at her. "You did well today." "Thank you for the opportunity," she replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the ranch hands watching from the corral, of the impropriety of such proximity. She stepped back. "I'll update the ledgers with today's findings." Isaiah nodded, his expression unreadable. "Dinner at 7. I'd like that," she said, then turned and walked to her quarters, feeling his gaze on her back the entire way. The weeks passed, and October gave way to November. Isabella's systems brought order to the ranch's operations, and costs decreased dramatically. She established herself as efficient and fair, earning if not the friendship of the ranch hands, then at least their respect. Her friendship with Isaiah deepened. Their dinners became a nightly ritual, conversations extending long into the evening as they discussed books, shared stories, and planned ranch improvements. Isabella found herself looking forward to these hours more than anything else, savoring Isaiah's dry humor, his thoughtful observations, and the way he listened to her as if her opinions truly mattered. She tried not to dwell on the flutter in her chest when he smiled, or the warmth that spread through her when their hands accidentally touched over ledgers or coffee cups. Such feelings were dangerous. He was her employer, and he'd be leaving eventually. Besides, no man would want to tie himself to a woman with her reputation, her burden of shame. One evening in mid-November, as they sat before the fireplace after dinner, Isaiah broke their comfortable silence. "Zeke's returning next week." Isabella's heart sank. Zeke's return meant Isaiah's role would change, perhaps end altogether. "I see. Will you be leaving then?" "Not immediately. Zeke wants me to stay on through spring, help with the calving season and the cattle drive to Kansas." He studied her reaction. "That is, if you don't mind continuing our arrangement." "Our arrangement, working together, these dinners." His gaze held hers. "Being friends, friends." The word both warmed and disappointed her. "Of course, I've appreciated your friendship greatly." Isaiah nodded, though something in his expression suggested he'd hoped for a different response. "Good, that's good." The tension between them grew until Isabella stood abruptly. "It's getting late. I should review the supply orders for tomorrow." "Isabella," Isaiah said, catching her hand as she passed. Whatever he intended to say was interrupted by pounding on the front door. They exchanged concerned glances before Isaiah went to answer it. Jose stood on the porch, his expression grave. "Rider coming, Mr. West. Says there's trouble in town." The rider was one of the young men from the general store, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Mr. West," he gasped, "there's a fire at the bank. Marshall sent me to fetch you, says we need every able hand." "I'll gather the men," Isaiah said, already turning toward the bunkhouse. "I'm coming too," Isabella said. Isaiah shook his head. "It's too dangerous. I know every inch of that bank. My father built it. I can help." When he still hesitated, she added, "Please, Isaiah. Let me do this for the town that's shunned me. Let me prove myself." Something in her plea reached him, and he nodded reluctantly. "Stay close to me." The ride into Amarillo was frantic, Isabella clinging to Penny's back as they galloped through the darkness. The glow of the fire was visible for miles, a sickly orange against the night sky. As they thundered into town, Isabella's heart clenched at the sight of the bank engulfed in flames, with townsfolk forming a bucket brigade from the water trough to the burning building. Marshal Talbot spotted them immediately. "West, thank God. We need men on the roof of the mercantile. Sparks are landing there, and the fire's spreading to the apothecary next door." Isaiah barked orders, sending ranch hands to different positions. He turned to Isabella. "Stay here, help with the buckets." "The vault," she said urgently. "If the fire reaches the back room where the safe is, there are documents that could be lost forever: deeds, wills, land grants." "It's too dangerous to go inside," Isaiah insisted. "There's a side entrance through the alley," she persisted. "It might not be fully engulfed yet." Isaiah's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Show me." They slipped down the alley beside the bank, where smoke billowed but flames hadn't yet reached. The side door was locked, but Isaiah kicked it in with a powerful thrust of his boot. Smoke poured out and he pulled a bandana over his nose and mouth, handing another to Isabella. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "If I say run, you run. No arguments." Isabella nodded, tying the cloth around her face. They entered the bank, crouching low to avoid the worst of the smoke. The main room was already consumed by fire, but the hallway to the back offices remained passable. Isabella led the way, navigating by memory through the thickening smoke. The vault room was filled with smoke but not yet burning. The massive iron door stood closed. "You know the combination," Isaiah shouted over the roar of the fire. "Yes." Isabella knelt before the dial, her fingers trembling as she turned it. "Left to 18, right to 72, left to 34, right to 55." Her father's birth date and her mother's. The mechanism clicked and the heavy door swung open. Inside, shelves held stacks of documents, lockboxes, and bags of coins. Isabella grabbed the leather portfolio marked deeds and thrust it at Isaiah, then reached for the one labeled wills. "That's enough," Isaiah shouted as a crash sounded from the main room. "We need to go now." Isabella grabbed one more portfolio, land grants, before following Isaiah back through the smoke-filled hallway. They'd almost reached the side door when a burning beam crashed down, blocking their exit. Isaiah pulled her back, looking frantically for another escape route. The front door was a wall of flame, impossible to pass. "The window," Isabella pointed to a small window high on the wall of what had been her father's office. "It leads to the back alley." Isaiah smashed the glass with his elbow, cleared the frame of shards, and boosted Isabella up. She wriggled through, clutching the documents, and tumbled onto the dirt of the alley. Isaiah followed, his larger frame barely squeezing through the opening. They staggered away from the building just as the roof collapsed with a deafening roar, sending a geyser of sparks into the night sky. Isaiah pulled Isabella against him, shielding her from the heat and debris, his body solid and protective against hers. For a moment, they simply stood there, breathing hard, alive. Then Isabella remembered the documents and pulled away to check them. "They're safe," she gasped, relief flooding her. Isaiah's face was streaked with soot, his eyes intense as he examined her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No," she assured him. "Just some scrapes from the window." They made their way back to the front of the bank, where the bucket brigade was now fighting to save the neighboring buildings. Marshal Talbot spotted them and rushed over. "West, Miss Winters, we thought you were," he broke off, staring at the portfolios in Isabella's arms. "Are those deeds, wills, and land grants?" Isabella explained, handing them over. "From the vault." The marshal's eyes widened. "You risked your lives for these. People's homes, inheritances, livelihoods depend on those papers," Isabella said simply. Word spread quickly through the crowd. Townspeople who had avoided Isabella for years now stared at her with new eyes. This woman who had braved fire to save their property rights, their legal claims, their futures. Mr. Peterson from the general store approached hesitantly. "Miss Winters, we can't thank you enough." Others followed, hesitant at first, then with growing warmth offering thanks, expressing concern for her well-being, treating her, for the first time in 4 years, like a member of the community rather than an outcast. The fire was eventually contained, though the bank was a total loss. As dawn broke over Amarillo, the exhausted firefighters and volunteers gathered in the town square. Mayor Thompson addressed the crowd, thanking everyone for their efforts. "And special recognition," he concluded, "to Miss Isabella Winters and Mr. Isaiah West, whose bravery saved irreplaceable documents that would have meant financial ruin for many of our citizens." The crowd applauded, and Isabella felt tears prick her eyes. Isaiah's hand found hers, squeezing gently in understanding. As they prepared to ride back to the Double D, tired and soot-stained but triumphant, Mrs. Abernathy approached Isabella. "Miss Winters," the elderly woman said, "I owe you an apology, we all do. We've treated you poorly these past years, blaming you for your father's sins." She patted Isabella's hand. "Come by the shop next week. I have a new shipment of fabric from St. Louis. You could use a proper dress." Isabella smiled through her exhaustion. "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy, I'd like that." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both Isabella and Isaiah too tired for conversation. But something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding, a bond forged in danger. Back at the ranch, Isaiah insisted on treating the cuts on Isabella's hands from the broken glass. As he gently cleaned her wounds in the kitchen, his touch tender despite his calloused fingers, he finally broke the silence. "You were amazing tonight," he said softly. "Brave, selfless." Isabella looked down at their joined hands. "I just did what needed doing." "No." He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You did more than that. You showed this town who you really are, not your father's daughter but your own woman, strong, principled." Their faces were inches apart, his eyes intense in the lamplight. Isabella's breath caught as his gaze dropped to her lips. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. Instead, he released her hand and stood. "You should rest. It's been a long night." Disappointment washed through her, but she nodded. "You too, thank you for everything." She left the kitchen, feeling his eyes on her back, wondering what might have happened if he'd had the courage, or she had to bridge that final distance between them. The next week brought significant changes to Isabella's life in Amarillo. News of her bravery spread, transforming her from pariah to heroine overnight. People who had crossed the street to avoid her now stopped to chat, invited her to Sunday socials, offered her small kindnesses that had been withheld for years. More importantly, her professional standing improved dramatically. The bank's board of directors, grateful for her quick thinking during the fire, offered her a position as account manager once the bank was rebuilt. The mayor consulted her on town finances. Even Mr. Peterson sheepishly offered her credit at the general store. Isabella accepted their overtures graciously, but without illusion. She knew how quickly public opinion could shift. Still, she couldn't deny the relief of walking through town without shame, of being judged for her own actions rather than her father's. At the Double D, her relationship with Isaiah grew increasingly complex. Their dinners continued, their conversations deepening as they shared more of themselves. Isaiah told her about his difficult childhood with an abusive father, his years on the cattle trails, the events that had led him to leave the Rangers, a shootout that had left him questioning the violence of that life. Isabella shared her own stories, happy memories of her mother, the confusion and shame following her father's betrayal, her dreams of someday traveling to Boston to see her mother's childhood home. Yet, despite their growing closeness, a certain restraint remained between them. Isaiah was unfailingly respectful, careful never to cross the line from friendship to something more, though Isabella sometimes caught him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. She told herself it was for the best he would be leaving in the spring, and she was finally establishing herself in Amarillo. Romantic entanglements would only lead to heartbreak. Zeke Davis returned to the Double D in late November, bringing with him a sharp business mind and a gruff but fair manner. He was older than Isabella had expected, in his 60s with silver hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the Texas sun. He approved of Isabella's changes to the ranch's financial systems and seemed impressed by her determination. "West told me you were a find," he said after reviewing her ledgers. "Seems he undersold you." "Thank you, Mr. Davis," Isabella replied, pleased by the compliment. "Call me Zeke." "Everyone does." He studied her thoughtfully. "You planning to take that bank job when they rebuild?" Isabella hesitated. "I haven't decided. The position here at the Double D has been fulfilling." Zeke nodded. "Well, you've got a place here as long as you want it. Though I suspect the town will come calling with better offers now that they've seen what you're worth." His words proved prophetic. As November turned to December, Isabella received several employment offers from businesses in Amarillo. The most tempting came from the bank's board, a position as head bookkeeper, with a salary nearly double what she earned at the Double D. "You should take it," Isaiah said when she told him about the offer during their evening meal. "It's a good opportunity." Something in his tone made Isabella study him more closely. "Do you want me to leave the ranch?" "Of course not," he said quickly. "But I don't want to hold you back either. You deserve recognition, a chance to rebuild your life in town." "And what about our friendship?" she asked, the word inadequate for what had grown between them. Isaiah's eyes met hers, filled with an emotion she couldn't name. "That wouldn't change," he said quietly. "I'd still be here. For a while, at least. For a while." The reminder of his eventual departure stung. "I'll think about it," she said. December brought cold weather and holiday preparations to the Double D. Isabella helped Mrs. Gomez decorate the main house with pine boughs and red ribbons, and the ranch hands erected a towering Christmas tree in the great room. Despite the festive atmosphere, Isabella felt increasingly unsettled about her future. The bank's board wanted an answer about the position, but she found herself reluctant to leave the Double D to leave Isaiah. Yet she knew that staying for him was foolish when he had given her no indication that his feelings matched the depth of hers. A week before Christmas, Isabella rode into town to do some shopping. The rebuilt bank was progressing rapidly, its frame already standing where the old building had burned. As she passed, Mr. Thompson, the bank president, hailed her. "Miss Winters, have you considered our offer? The board meets tomorrow and we'd like to announce your appointment." Isabella smiled politely. "I'm still considering it, Mr. Thompson. Could I have until after Christmas to decide?" Thompson frowned. "The board was hoping for an answer sooner. Perhaps I could sweeten the deal, $35 a month, and we'll provide housing above the bank once it's completed." It was a generous offer, more than she could reasonably refuse. "May I let you know tomorrow?" she asked. "Of course." Thompson tipped his hat. "We're eager to have you, Miss Winters. Your father may have betrayed this town, but you've more than redeemed the family name." Isabella continued her shopping, purchasing small gifts for the ranch hands, Mrs. Gomez and Zeke. For Isaiah, she had commissioned something special from Mrs. Abernathy, a hand-stitched leather journal, his initials embossed on the cover. She hoped it would remind him of her after he left. As she rode back to the ranch, Snow began to fall, soft white flakes that melted on Penny's chestnut coat. The prairie stretched around her, vast and beautiful in its winter garb, and Isabella felt a pang at the thought of not seeing it every day, of not riding out with Isaiah to check the herds, of not sharing quiet evenings by the fire. Yet the practical part of her knew the bank position was the sensible choice. It offered security, respectability, a chance to fully reclaim her place in Amarillo society. Isaiah had never suggested she should base her decision on him, had, in fact, encouraged her to take the bank's offer. That evening she found Isaiah in the stables, grooming his black gelding. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart stutter. "How was town?" he asked. "Cold," she replied, unwinding her scarf. The bank made a better offer, $35 a month, plus housing. Isaiah's hand stilled on the brush. "That's generous. They want an answer tomorrow," he nodded, resuming his grooming with unnecessary vigor. "You'd be a fool to turn it down." "Would I?" she challenged, suddenly tired of his careful distance. "Is money the only consideration?" Isaiah set down the brush, turning to face her fully. "What else is there, Isabella?" The way he said her name, soft, almost reverent, gave her courage. "There's this," she said, gesturing between them. "Whatever this is between us, unless I've imagined it all." His expression tightened. "You haven't imagined it, but I have nothing to offer you, Isabella. No land, no fortune, no permanent home. I'm a drifter who stayed in one place longer than usual, that's all." "That's not all," she insisted, moving closer. "You're the man who gave me a chance when no one else would, who sees me for who I am, not for my father's sins, who makes me feel—" She faltered, then pressed on. "Who makes me feel like I belong somewhere for the first time in years." Isaiah's eyes darkened with emotion. "Isabella, don't. I'm leaving in the spring, you know that." "You don't have to," she whispered. "You could stay." "And do what?" "Work for Zeke until he sells the ranch. Then what?" He shook his head. "You deserve better than a man with no future to offer." "Shouldn't that be my decision?" Isabella demanded, frustration rising. "I'm tired of men deciding what's best for me, my father, the townspeople, now you. I know my own heart, Isaiah West." He reached for her then, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "And I know mine. That's why I'm telling you to take the bank job, build a life here. Find someone who can give you the stability you deserve." Isabella stepped back, hurt by his rejection. "I see. Well, thank you for your advice, Mr. West. I'll inform Mr. Thompson of my decision tomorrow." She turned and walked away, tears burning her eyes. Behind her, Isaiah called her name, but she didn't look back. That night, Isabella packed her few belongings, her decision made. She would accept the bank's offer, move back to town, and try to forget Isaiah West and the foolish dreams she'd harbored about him. She was placing the last of her clothes in her carpetbag when a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Zeke Davis standing there, hat in hand. "Evening, Miss Winters," he said. "Mind if I come in for a moment?" Surprised, Isabella stepped back to allow him entry. "Of course, Mr. Davis." "Zeke, is something wrong?" Zeke settled his tall frame on her single chair, looking uncomfortable. "Heard you're leaving us for the bank." "News travels fast," Isabella said. "Yes, I've decided to accept their offer. Because of the money, or because of that bull-headed cowboy in my employ?" Isabella blinked, taken aback by his directness. "The position offers security and a chance to rebuild my reputation in town." Zeke grunted. "That's not an answer." When Isabella remained silent, he sighed. "Look, I don't usually meddle in others' affairs, but I've known Isaiah since he was a raw kid on his first cattle drive. He's a good man who spent his life running first from his past, now from his feelings for you." Isabella's heart quickened. "He made it clear there's no future for us." "Did he now?" Zeke's eyes twinkled. Funny thing is, he just asked me about buying into the Double D as a partner. What? Isabella sat heavily on her bed. Yep, said he's tired of drifting, wants to put down roots. Asked if I'd consider selling him a quarter share with the option to buy more as he earns it. Zeke studied her reaction. Now, why do you suppose a confirmed wanderer suddenly wants to become a Texas rancher? Hope bloomed in Isabella's chest. I don't know. I think you do. Zeke stood. That boy's been half in love with you since the day you walked 3 miles to apply for a job you knew you wouldn't get. He just doesn't think he's good enough for you. That's absurd, Isabella protested. Is it? You come from education, refinement. He grew up dirt poor with a mean drunk for a father. Zeke moved to the door. All I'm saying is, before you make any decisions about the bank, maybe you should talk to Isaiah. Really talk. He tipped his hat. Night, Miss Winters. After Zeke left, Isabella sat motionless, her mind whirling. Isaiah wanted to buy into the ranch, to stay in Amarillo. Could it possibly be because of her? Sleep eluded her that night. By morning, she had made a new decision. She rode into town early, before most of the ranch was stirring, and went directly to the bank's temporary offices. Mr. Thompson, she said when admitted to his presence, I'm honored by your offer, but I must decline. My place is at the Double D. Thompson's disappointment was evident. May I ask why? Is it the salary? We could perhaps go to $40. It's not the money, Isabella assured him. The Double D has become my home and theirs. Unfinished business there that I need to resolve. Understanding dawned in Thompson's eyes. Ah. Well, should circumstances change, our door remains open, Miss Winters. Thank you. Isabella hesitated. There is one matter I'd like to discuss. The Winters family still owes restitution to many in this town. I'd like to establish a payment plan, a percentage of my earnings each month until the debt is cleared. Thompson's eyebrows rose. That's admirable, Miss Winters, but hardly necessary. Your father's crimes are not your burden to bear. Perhaps not legally, Isabella said firmly, but morally I feel responsible. I want to make things right, however long it takes. Impressed, Thompson agreed to help arrange such a plan. Isabella left his office feeling lighter, as if a weight she'd carried for years had begun to lift. When she returned to the Double D, she found Isaiah waiting on the porch of the main house, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Zeke said you went to town, he said as she dismounted. To accept the bank position. No, she replied, handing Penny's reins to a waiting stable hand. To decline it. Isaiah's eyes widened. But why? It's everything you've worked for: respectability, security, a place in the community. Isabella climbed the porch steps until she stood before him. Not everything, she said softly. Zeke told me you're buying into the ranch. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He had no right to. He had every right, Isabella interrupted, because you were too stubborn to tell me yourself. She moved closer. Why, Isaiah? Why now, when you've been planning to leave since the day we met? He looked away, then back, his blue eyes intense. You know why. I want to hear you say it, she insisted. Isaiah ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. Because I can't imagine leaving you, he admitted roughly. Because for the first time since I can remember, I want to stay somewhere, with someone. He took her hands in his. With you, Isabella. Only you. Joy surged through her, bright and powerful. Why didn't you tell me? I told myself you deserved better than a drifter with no prospects, he said. Then I realized if I wanted to be worthy of you, I needed to change, not expect you to settle. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. I've saved some money over the years, enough for a quarter share of the Double D. It's a start. It's more than a start, Isabella said, blinking back tears. It's a future, our future if you want it to be. Isaiah's face softened with wonder. Are you sure, Isabella? The town is finally accepting you. I don't want you to sacrifice that for me. I'm not sacrificing anything, she assured him. The Double D is my home now. You are my home. She squeezed his hands. Besides, I've arranged to repay my father's debts over time. That matters more to me than their immediate acceptance. Pride and love mingled in Isaiah's expression. You never cease to amaze me, he murmured, drawing her closer. I love you, Isabella Winters. I think I have since the moment you walked into that interview, head high despite knowing every hand was against you. I love you too, she whispered, the words she'd held back for so long finally free. Enough to wait for you to stop being so noble and stubborn. Isaiah laughed, then sobered, his gaze dropping to her lips. May I kiss you? I've wanted to for months. I wish you would, she replied, lifting her face to his. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then with growing passion as she responded eagerly. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him, and Isabella wound her arms around his neck, losing herself in the kiss she'd dreamed of for so long. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. Every door in town closed to you, he murmured. But mine's open, Isabella, always has been. And always will be, she asked, still hardly daring to believe this happiness was hers to keep. Always, he promised, sealing the vow with another kiss. Spring came to the Texas Panhandle, bringing with it new calves, wildflowers, and the promise of growth. The Double D thrived under its unique management team, Zeke's experience, Isaiah's practical knowledge of cattle, and Isabella's financial acumen combining to make the ranch more profitable than ever. Isabella and Isaiah were married on a perfect April day, with the entire town of Amarillo in attendance. The ceremony took place on the Double D, beneath an arch of wild roses, with Zeke giving the bride away, and the ranch hands serving as reluctant but surprisingly emotional witnesses. Isabella wore a gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Abernathy had helped her make, with her mother's lace veil and a bouquet of Texas bluebonnets. Isaiah, standing tall and handsome in a new suit, watched her approach with such naked adoration that several of the town's matrons dabbed at their eyes. I never thought I'd find a home, Isaiah said in his vows, his voice strong despite the emotion in his eyes. Then you walked into my life and I realized home isn't a place, it's a person. You're my home, Isabella, my heart, my future. Isabella, through happy tears, promised to love him through all seasons, all challenges, all joys. Every door closed to me, she said, until you offered yours. Now we'll build our own doors, our own walls, our own life together. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing in the barn and enough food to feed half the county. As twilight settled over the ranch, Isaiah found his bride sitting on the porch, watching the festivities with a contented smile. Happy, Mrs. West? He asked, sitting beside her and taking her hand. Happier than I ever thought possible, she replied, leaning against his shoulder. And you? I have everything I never knew I wanted, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. A home, a purpose, and the most remarkable woman in Texas as my wife. 2 years later, Isabella stood on that same porch, watching Isaiah ride in from checking the south pasture. Their son, Robert Zeke West, named for her father, because Isabella believed in redemption. And for the man who had brought them together, played at her feet, his dark curls and blue eyes a perfect blend of his parents. As Isaiah dismounted and swept his son into his arms, his smile bright with love, Isabella thought of the long journey that had brought them here, of closed doors and open hearts, of a town that had finally embraced her, of a love that had given her a second chance at family. Looks like another fine day on the Double D, Isaiah said as he joined her on the porch, settling their son on his hip. The finest, Isabella agreed, stretching up to kiss her husband, grateful for the man who had opened his door to her when every other had closed, and for the home they had built together, stronger and more beautiful than either could have imagined alone.